on this, let's speak to Director of Popular Conservatives, Mark Littlewood. Mark, seemingly the Prime Minister made the decision to make this big speech on AI, an emphasis on how it will be good for growth. But over the weekend and today, we've had more troubling economic news. Also, a source close to the Treasury briefing the papers that Rachel Reeves is depressed and that she doesn't know which way to go. She doesn't know what to do. She hasn't got any easy decisions to make. It's a little bit of a mess, Mark. What should she do?
Well, I don't blame her for being depressed, Emily, and I'm not sure the Prime Minister's speech would have done a great deal to lift her spirits, especially not sort of backing her as being Chancellor right the way through to the general election. Of course, we'd expect a number of reshuffles from between now and then, so I'd be surprised if she is Chancellor in 4 years' time. My own view is that she's probably on borrowed time already. Look, it's what Catherine was just talking about, isn't it? How do you unlock growth? And the Prime Minister says AI. Well, fine, and I think that probably will help in the private sector. I think are likely to use that ingeniously and in an entrepreneurial fashion. I'm a bit more sceptical about its application in the public sector. I mean, the National Health Service still uses fax machines, for heaven's sake. They don't seem to be particularly geared to new technologies. But there's going to be one point where I disagree with Catherine on growth. I don't think it's difficult to get growth. You just need the political will. As former President Ronald Reagan used to say, there are no easy solutions, but there are simple solutions. And if you want growth in the economy, you need to dampen down government expenditure. You don't want the state crowding out all activity. You can therefore get taxes down in line with that. And you deregulate. You make it easier for businesses to do things rather than passing bans and prohibitions and compliance orders. Well, the government seems to be willing the end of growth. They keep going on about it, but they don't seem to be willing any of the means of growth. And I suspect that Rachel Reeves, or if she is replaced, any future Chancellor, is going to have to start by finding some big savings in government expenditure, possibly as much as 100 billion a year. And those are going to be difficult political decisions, but they're not particularly difficult economic decisions.
That's a hugely important point there, because, I mean, to give Rachel Reeves some credit, has she not taken some very unpopular, difficult decisions on spending? Perhaps one of the reasons why Rachel Reeves is quite so unpopular with the public, indeed this government unpopular with the public, is they ended the universal benefit of winter fuel allowance to all pensioners, despite no matter how wealthy they were. I mean, one might say that that's one of the easier things to cut, not giving millionaires free cash every winter for their fuel.
Hang on, they cut it from 10 million pensioners. Not just the millionaires.
I mean, they also cut it from millionaires. I mean, that's an easy cut. I think that's probably one of those Reagan cuts that you might say, well, that's a simple cut, but it's politically difficult. I mean, if that was sort of the easiest bit, I mean, it's only going to get harder.
It is, Tom, and I think the other problem here has been an absence of obvious strategy. So had the government said, for example, going into the general election, look, public expenditure is too high, and here are some signposts about how we're going to get it down. We actually think, for example, that affluent pensioners are not going to get the sort of support that they previously had. So we'll be looking at winter fuel allowance. We might look at no longer triple locking the pension. You put down some, if you like, principles about how you're going to get public spending down. You might say, for example, there'll be a pay freeze in the public sector until there are proven productivity improvements. But I think a failure of Rachel Reeves, she's taken these decisions, as you say, unpopular decisions, rightly, Tom, but they seem to be entirely tactical. They don't fit together as a coherent piece. It's a bit like she's sort of scratching her head, looking for money down the back of the sofa and sort of suddenly thinks, oh, well, winter fuel allowance, or how about raising tax on farmers with regard to inheritance tax? So if you're serious about a fiscal consolidation, that is to say the government getting its spending out of control, you need to sort of start with a big picture. What are the principles that are going to drive that? So you can save, I don't know, let's say 5% of government expenditure, maybe 10% of government expenditure. And at the moment, that's all higgledy-piggledy.
I think that's absolutely right, Mark. I think that's absolutely right. It does seem rather incoherent at the moment. I mean, we're hearing that Rachel Reeves is apparently going to tell Britain's regulators that they need to now strip back on various regulations in order to boost the economy and bring back that growth. So that's a Labour Chancellor admitting that regulation can stop economic growth. OK, but then we've got Angela Rayner with this big package package of workers' rights. The CBI is saying they're going to be disastrous and lead to loads of job losses. What is Rachel Reeves going to do? Very difficult for her to come down when she's got pressures within the cabinet.
Yeah, I mean, you're right on the Rayner employment bill, Emily. I mean, already we've got businesses saying that, you know, hiring new people is going to be difficult, pay rise is going to be difficult, in large part due to the national insurance rise. I mean, here's an idea. I don't think that the Labour government could do this politically, but theoretically, a complete moratorium on new regulation. We're not going to pass any new regulation for the next 12 months. A freeze. So we're not going to have any more additional compliance costs on businesses or different sectors. We're not going to have any more advertising bans. We're not going to regulate football or ban vapes, for example. No more regulation for 12 months. Now, that still means there's a colossal amount of regulation on businesses, but at least it doesn't get worse. But that's the sort of thing I'd do. But I suspect sitting around the cabinet table is not just Angela Rayner, but a whole swathe of others who would consider that to be heresy, that a Labour government is there to regulate ever more tightly. So she's between a rock and a hard place. And I'm afraid I think that the consequences of that is expect more tax, more regulation, only minimal changes to government expenditure. Therefore, growth will continue to flatline. I mean, it's basically zero at the moment. And I'm afraid the problem will get worse.
Well, on that cheery note, Mark Littlewood, thank you so much for joining us here on Good Afternoon Britain. My goodness me, what a prognosis.
Well, thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed that video, please make sure you give it a like and subscribe to the Popcon YouTube channel. You can also find out more about us on our website, popularconservatism.com, and you can follow us on social media. Details are in the show notes below.